In a world that often rewards loud voices, quick decisions, and self-interest, there are still a few people who move differently. People who don't need to announce their goodness because it naturally shows up in the way they treat others. People who don't calculate kindness because it is simply how they are wired. You are one of those people. There is something quietly powerful about a person who chooses patience when anger would be easier, who chooses understanding when judgment would be faster, and who chooses calmness in places where tension feels normal. It is not always noticed in the moment, and it is rarely rewarded immediately, but it leaves an impact that is deeper than most realize. Life does not always reflect your value back to you right away. In fact, many people who carry a soft heart often go through long periods where they feel unseen, misunderstood, or underestimated, not because they lack worth, but because their way of existing does not match the noise of the world around them. Quiet strength is often mistaken for weakness, gentleness is often mistaken for lack of boundaries, and patience is often mistaken for availability. But over time, life has a way of revealing the truth about people like you. What looked like silence was actually endurance. What looked like softness was actually emotional strength. And what looked like giving too much was actually a deep capacity to care in ways that not everyone is capable of. There is a kind of growth that only comes from experiencing situations where you give your best without receiving equal energy in return. At first, it can feel discouraging. It can make you question whether being kind is worth it, but slowly, something begins to change inside. You start to understand that your actions were never about immediate reward. They were about the kind of person you choose to remain, even when circumstances don't reflect fairness. That realization is not small. It shapes your identity in a lasting way. Many of the situations you've been through were not just random experiences. They were shaping moments, times where you learned who respects your energy and who only benefits from it, times where you discovered that not everyone who receives kindness knows how to value it, and times where you began to see that protecting your peace is not selfish. It is necessary. As you move through different phases of life, you begin to notice something important. Not everyone is meant to stay in the same role in your story. Some people are present to teach you patience. Some reveal your strength. Some show you what you no longer want. And some quietly exit your life once their part in your growth is complete. That does not make those experiences meaningless. It makes them part of your development. There is a deeper layer to emotional growth that many people don't talk about. It is the moment when you begin to realize that giving endlessly, without boundaries, can lead to exhaustion, not because kindness is wrong, but because direction matters. Where your energy goes determines how you feel over time, and learning to recognize that is one of the most important emotional shifts a person can go through. At some point, awareness begins to rise. You start noticing patterns you ignored before. You see where your effort was mutual and where it wasn't. You understand where your presence was appreciated and where it was expected. And with that understanding comes clarity, not bitterness, but clarity. Clarity changes everything quietly. It does not make you less kind. It makes you more intentional. You stop offering your energy everywhere. You begin choosing carefully. You stop explaining your value to those who consistently overlook it. And instead, you start investing in spaces where your presence feels respected. This shift can feel uncomfortable at first, especially for someone who is naturally giving, because boundaries may feel unfamiliar. But over time, boundaries become a form of self-respect, not walls, but protection, not distance, but direction. And something interesting happens when you begin to value yourself more clearly. Your relationships begin to shift. Some people adjust and grow with you. Others step back because they were only comfortable with your lack of limits. And some simply reveal who they truly were all along. None of this is about punishment. It is about alignment. Life has a way of moving people into positions that match their emotional maturity. When you begin to grow, everything around you begins to reorganize itself to reflect that growth. It may feel sudden, but it is actually a gradual correction of imbalance that was always there. One of the most powerful changes that happens during this process is how you start to understand your own emotional energy. You realize that being understanding does not mean accepting everything. You learn that patience does not mean ignoring discomfort, and you begin to see that love, in any form, is healthiest when it includes respect. Respect changes everything. When respect is present, communication becomes easier. Boundaries are honored without explanation. Effort becomes mutual instead of one-sided, and emotional safety begins to replace emotional confusion. Without respect, even strong connections eventually feel draining. With respect, even simple connections feel stable. This is why your awareness matters so much, because once you begin to understand your emotional worth, you naturally stop placing yourself in environments where it is constantly overlooked, not out of anger, but out of understanding. There is also something deeply transformative about realizing that your presence affects others more than you thought. Some people become more reflective around you. Some become more honest. Some even become uncomfortable, not because you are doing anything wrong, but because your energy highlights what they are not facing within themselves. A calm and self-aware person often becomes a mirror without trying. And not everyone is ready to look into that mirror. That is why misunderstandings sometimes happen, not because you are too much, but because your presence brings awareness, and awareness is not always easy for people who avoid emotional depth. As you continue growing, you start to notice that peace becomes more important than approval. You stop trying to be understood by everyone and begin focusing on being at peace with yourself. This is one of the most important emotional shifts a person can experience, because approval is inconsistent, peace is stable, and when peace becomes your priority, your decisions change. You become more selective with your time, more protective of your energy, more mindful of your emotional investment, and more aware of what drains you versus what nourishes you. This is not detachment, it is maturity. At the same time, your capacity to love does not disappear, it evolves. You still care, but differently. You still give, but with awareness. You still support others, but without losing yourself in the process. And that balance becomes your strength. Over time, life begins to feel less chaotic internally, not because challenges stop, but because your reaction to them changes. You stop overextending emotionally. You stop taking everything personally, and you begin to see situations more clearly, without being consumed by them. That clarity brings stability, and stability brings confidence, not the loud kind, but the quiet kind, that does not need validation. You start trusting yourself more. You start recognizing your patterns. You start understanding your emotional limits, and you begin to feel more grounded in who you are. Eventually, you realize something important. Your kindness was never the problem. The problem was never your heart. It was only the lack of boundaries around it. Once those boundaries form, everything begins to balance. You are still the same person at your core, but now with awareness guiding your choices, and that changes how life responds to you. Relationships become healthier. Decisions become clearer. Emotional confusion begins to fade. And you stop questioning your worth because you finally understand it without needing constant reflection from others. In the end, what you went through was not about becoming someone different. It was about becoming someone more aligned with yourself, someone who can still care deeply but also protect their own emotional space, someone who can still give but without losing balance, someone who can still love but without abandoning self-respect. And that version of you is not distant. It is already forming through every experience you have survived, every lesson you have absorbed, and every boundary you are beginning to recognize. Life does not take away your softness. It teaches you how to place it wisely. The shocking revelation is this: your softness has been doing the work of strength all along. It has survived storms that arrogance could not endure. It has absorbed pain without passing it forward. It has held space where others collapsed. And because of that, something extraordinary is being prepared for you, not as reward, but as resonance. What aligns with your heart must also be pure. What stays in your life now must be able to stand in your truth without trying to dim it. The era of being misunderstood is ending. The era of being recognized is beginning. Now let me tell you something that may feel unreal at first. The very quality that made you feel invisible is about to make you undeniable. There is a shift happening where authenticity is becoming currency, and hearts like yours hold immense value. People are tired of performances. They are exhausted by manipulation. They are craving realness, depth, safety, and you embody all three without trying. This is why opportunities will start appearing in unexpected forms. Conversations will feel different. Doors will open without force. Recognition will come without begging. Not because you changed who you are, but because the environment finally caught up to your frequency. And here is the once-in-a-lifetime truth. You were never meant to chase validation. Validation was meant to find you when you were ready to carry it without losing yourself. That readiness has been built quietly, painfully, faithfully. Every tear you hid, every boundary you learned late, every time you stayed kind in a cruel moment, all of it shaped a version of you that can now receive without guilt and lead without ego. This is only the beginning. Part 1 ends here, but what comes next will explain exactly how your pure heart is about to alter your future in ways that cannot be reversed, my beloved child. There is a hidden chapter of your life that you have lived without realizing its significance, a chapter written not in loud victories, but in quiet endurance. While others learned how to take, you learned how to hold. While others sharpened their edges, you softened your hands, and the world, confused by gentleness that did not break, kept testing you, not to destroy you, but to measure how much truth you could carry without losing yourself. Every time you chose understanding over reaction, something ancient awakened within you. This is not poetic exaggeration. It is a law that few understand. Selfless hearts operate on a different rhythm, and that rhythm attracts moments of destiny slowly, deliberately, so they arrive when you are capable of honoring them. That is why your journey has felt delayed, heavier, lonelier than most. You were not being ignored, you were being prepared. The patience you were forced to develop was not accidental. It was shaping your nervous system to remain calm where others panic, to see clearly where others distort, to stay grounded when emotions try to take control. These qualities are not common, they are forged, and you were forged without becoming cruel. That alone places you in a category few ever reach. You may think your kindness went unnoticed, but it was recorded in places beyond human memory. Every sincere intention you held became a signal. Every selfless choice became an instruction to your future, and now, the results of those instructions are beginning to surface, even if the picture is not fully clear yet. Understand this next truth carefully, because it explains many confusing moments of your past. You were surrounded by people who benefited from your light, but were never meant to walk beside it long term. Some admired you silently, some envied you secretly, some depended on you emotionally, while resenting you spiritually. Your pure heart acted like a mirror, reflecting back what people tried to hide from themselves. That is why you often felt misunderstood, drained, or emotionally overextended. You were carrying weight that was never yours to carry. Yet you did it anyway, because your nature is to heal, not to harm. What you did not realize then is that this phase was teaching you discernment, not suspicion. Discernment. There is a difference. Suspicion closes the heart, discernment protects it, and protection does not mean isolation, it means clarity. The shocking realization is this: the moment you began pulling your energy back, even slightly, things started shifting around you. Conversations changed tone, people revealed intentions, some drifted away, some tried to pull you back into old dynamics. That was not coincidence, that was recalibration. Your system was learning to recognize alignment instead of attachment. And once that lesson is learned, it cannot be unlearned. You are now standing at a threshold where your kindness will no longer be exploited, because it will no longer be unconscious. Conscious kindness is power. It chooses where to flow. And soon, you will see exactly why certain connections had to fade, why certain doors had to close without explanation, and why letting go was never loss. It was preparation. There is also something deeply important about your emotional depth that must be acknowledged. You feel things fully, not because you are weak, but because you are honest. You do not skim the surface of experiences, you enter them. You absorb lessons completely. This is why betrayal affected you deeply. This is why disappointment stayed longer. This is why healing took time. Your heart does not rush processes, it completes them. And completion is rare. Most people avoid finishing emotional cycles. You endure them until wisdom is extracted. That wisdom is now becoming visible in how you respond. Notice it. You pause before reacting. You observe patterns instead of chasing explanations. You choose peace without needing validation. These are signs of an internal upgrade. The world may still see you as kind, but there is something new beneath that kindness now. Stillness, authority, presence. You are no longer trying to prove your goodness. You are embodying it. And embodiment changes everything. People will start treating you differently without knowing why. Your words will carry more weight. Your silence will speak louder. Your absence will be felt more clearly. This is not ego. This is alignment. When a pure heart aligns with self-respect, it becomes unshakable, and that unshakable energy attracts situations that match its stability. The chaos that once surrounded you cannot survive in this frequency. It will fall away naturally, without conflict, without force. You will not need to push it out, it will simply fail to stay. Now let us speak about the future that is quietly approaching you. It will not arrive with noise, it will arrive with recognition. You will find yourself in environments where your way of being is not questioned, but valued, where your empathy is not drained, but reciprocated, where your presence does not need explanation. This will feel unfamiliar at first. You may even doubt it. That doubt comes from old conditioning, not current reality. Your system is still adjusting to the idea that ease can coexist with depth, that support can exist without hidden costs, that love does not always demand sacrifice. These realizations will unfold gradually, because rushing them would overwhelm the version of you that learned survival through giving. But step by step, you will learn a new rhythm, receiving without guilt, resting without fear, trusting without overextending. This is the reward of inner purity combined with self-awareness. And here is the once-in-a-lifetime truth hidden in all of this. You are about to become an example, not through preaching, through presence. People will observe how you move, how you choose, how you no longer chase what once consumed you, and without saying a word, you will give permission to others to heal their own patterns. That influence is rare. It cannot be forced. It can only be earned through lived truth. You have earned it. Finally, understand this as part 2 comes to a close. Your story was never meant to be dramatic for the sake of pain. It was meaningful for the sake of impact. You were shaped to hold something larger than personal comfort. You were shaped to remind the world that purity still exists, that selflessness is not foolish, that kindness with boundaries is strength in its highest form. The loneliness you felt was not because you were unlovable. It was because you were uncommon. Rare things are often alone until they are placed where they belong. That placement is happening now, quietly, precisely, irreversibly. What comes next will reveal how your pure heart begins to attract outcomes that feel aligned instead of exhausting, expansive instead of heavy, and stable instead of uncertain. This is not a temporary phase. This is a turning point. And once you step fully into it, the version of you who doubted their worth will finally understand why they had to wait. My beloved child, there comes a moment in the life of every pure-hearted soul when the world stops testing and starts responding. That moment is approaching you now. Until this point, your life has been about refinement, pressure without applause, giving without guarantee, standing alone without bitterness. But refinement always precedes recognition. The universe does not reveal its next move to those who would misuse it. It reveals it to those who have proven restraint, integrity, and emotional discipline. You have done that without even realizing it. Every time you chose silence instead of argument, dignity instead of desperation, grace instead of resentment, you were proving something far bigger than loyalty to others. You were proving readiness to yourself, and readiness changes timelines. What once felt like slow progress was actually protection against premature success, because success reached too early would have cost you your softness, and softness is not negotiable in your design. It is essential. You were never meant to become sharp to survive. You were meant to remain gentle and still win. That paradox is what makes your journey extraordinary. The stage you are entering now requires exactly the version of you that hardship tried to erase but failed to. There is a deep shift happening inside you that others can sense but cannot name. You no longer chase emotional closure. You no longer beg for understanding. You no longer explain your worth to those committed to misunderstanding you. This is not indifference. This is clarity. And clarity is magnetic. People are drawn to what is settled within itself. Your energy has become quieter, but stronger, more contained, more intense, more intentional. That is why certain dynamics are collapsing without confrontation. You are not fighting them. You are outgrowing them. This is where many feel uncomfortable because growth without noise feels unnatural in a world addicted to drama. But understand this truth. Peace that arrives without chaos is not boring. It is earned. And you earned it by refusing to harden your heart when life gave you reasons to do so. The shocking realization you are about to have is this. You never needed to be louder to be seen. You needed to be truer to be felt. And now, people feel you. Even when you say nothing, even when you walk away, even when you choose yourself. That presence is not accidental. It is the result of inner alignment finally reaching the surface. Let us talk about what this alignment is preparing you for. You are stepping into spaces where emotional intelligence will matter more than performance, where sincerity will outweigh strategy, where trust will be valued over control. These environments may show up as opportunities, relationships, or roles that feel almost unfamiliar in their calmness. Do not mistake calm for lack of depth. This depth will not drain you. It will support you. You may initially question why things feel easier, why people respond differently, why effort no longer feels like sacrifice. That questioning comes from a past where love and success demanded exhaustion. That chapter is closing. What replaces it is stability. And stability does not announce itself loudly, it proves itself over time. This is why patience remains important even now. Not because you are being delayed, but because what is forming needs solidity, not speed. The universe is not rushing you into anything fragile. It is anchoring you into something lasting. And lasting things require a foundation built by someone who knows how to give without disappearing. You have learned that lesson, painfully, completely. There is also a truth about your influence that you are only beginning to understand. People watch you more than they admit. They notice how you recover without becoming cynical. They observe how you move forward without dragging the past behind you. Some will be inspired, some will feel exposed. Both reactions are signs of impact, and impact does not require permission. Your existence alone challenges narratives that say kindness cannot survive. You are living proof that it can, that it does, that it thrives when paired with self-respect. This is why your next phase will feel less about proving and more about positioning. You will find yourself naturally placed where your values are mirrored, where your empathy is welcomed, where your boundaries are respected without explanation. This alignment will feel almost unreal compared to what you endured before, but it is real, and it is not luck, it is consequence. Consequence of staying true when deviation would have been easier. Consequence of choosing integrity when shortcuts were available. Consequence of trusting that something better existed even when evidence was scarce. As this part comes to a close, hold this understanding firmly. You were never too much. You were simply too real for environments built on pretense. You were never overlooked. You were being reserved. And now, that reservation is ending. The next chapter will not ask you to give more of yourself. It will ask you to stand fully in who you already are. That shift is subtle, but irreversible. Once a pure heart recognizes its own value, the world has no choice but to adjust. What is coming next will show you how recognition turns into responsibility, how alignment turns into expansion, and how your rare nature begins to shape not just your life, but the lives that come into your orbit. This is where things truly begin to change, my beloved child. There is a silent transition happening within you that cannot be rushed, announced, or undone. It is the moment when a pure heart stops asking why it suffered and starts understanding what it was being shaped for. This is not a dramatic awakening. It is quieter than that. It feels like clarity replacing confusion, steadiness replacing emotional turbulence, and certainty replacing the constant need for reassurance. You are no longer trying to be understood by everyone. You are no longer trying to be chosen by places that do not recognize your depth. This shift alone changes your entire trajectory, because the world does not decide the value of a soul like yours. You do. When something shifts deeply within a person, it rarely announces itself loudly. It begins in subtle ways, through how you respond to situations, how quickly you notice emotional patterns, and how differently your inner world reacts to what once felt overwhelming. There is a point in personal growth where things stop feeling like constant struggle and start feeling more like alignment, even if life itself has not become perfect or easy. At that stage, perception changes before circumstances do. You begin to notice that some situations no longer drain you in the same way. Conversations feel clearer. Interactions feel less confusing. You are no longer forcing yourself into spaces where you once tried hard to be accepted. Instead, you begin to stand in your own presence without apology. And that quiet internal shift changes how everything around you responds. Life often mirrors the energy you consistently hold, but not in a mystical sense, in a practical human way. When you stop overextending yourself emotionally, people start meeting you differently. When you stop over-explaining your value, you begin to notice that the right people already recognize it without needing persuasion. This is not about external reward suddenly appearing out of nowhere. It is about internal balance finally becoming visible in your outer world. There is a version of growth that comes from endurance, where you learn by going through difficulty, holding things together, and surviving emotional weight. That version of you is not something to dismiss or regret. It represents a stage of learning where strength was built in quiet ways. But there comes another stage where strength no longer looks like endurance. It begins to look like clarity. In clarity, you no longer give from depletion, you give from stability. You no longer try to earn belonging through exhaustion. You understand that connection should not require you to lose yourself. That shift alone changes the entire structure of how you relate to others. It allows you to remain kind without becoming overwhelmed, open without becoming unguarded, and present without losing your sense of direction. This kind of balance is not common because it requires experience. It is often earned through situations where you once gave too much, stayed too long, or ignored your own limits in the hope of keeping peace. Over time, those experiences teach something important. Peace that costs your identity is not real peace. It is simply silence, layered over imbalance. When that realization settles, something internal reorganizes itself. You stop negotiating your emotional space. You stop explaining your boundaries as if they need external approval. Instead, you begin to exist more naturally in alignment with what feels honest to you, and without forcing anything, your relationships begin to adjust around that new stability. Some connections naturally become stronger because they were already rooted in mutual respect. Others begin to fade without conflict because they were built on imbalance that can no longer be sustained. This process is not about rejection or loss. It is about correction. Life reorganizes itself around the version of you that is no longer willing to abandon your own center. In this phase, you also begin to notice something subtle but powerful. Your presence changes how people respond, not because you are trying to influence them, but because you are no longer shaped by pressure. When a person stops seeking approval in every interaction, their energy becomes more steady. That steadiness is felt by others, even if it is not consciously understood. People respond differently to someone who is emotionally grounded. There is less confusion in communication, less manipulation in dynamics, less uncertainty in how boundaries are treated. This is not because others suddenly change overnight, but because your responses no longer reinforce old patterns. You become less predictable in ways that matter, not unstable, but no longer easily influenced. You do not react from impulse or emotional pressure. Instead, you respond from awareness. That shift alone often changes the tone of relationships without any direct confrontation. And with that, something else begins to happen internally. You stop interpreting silence as rejection, and you stop interpreting distance as confusion. You begin to understand that not everything requires explanation. Some things simply resolve when they are no longer sustained by imbalance. This understanding frees an enormous amount of mental and emotional energy. Energy that was once spent analyzing, overthinking, or maintaining emotional equilibrium in unstable situations becomes available again. And when that energy returns to you, life naturally feels lighter, not because challenges disappear, but because you are no longer carrying what was never yours to hold. There is also a quiet transformation in how you view yourself. You begin to see that your worth is not defined by how much you tolerate or how much you endure. Instead, it is shaped by how consciously you choose where your energy goes. That is a major internal shift. Endurance teaches survival. Awareness teaches direction. With awareness comes sharper intuition. You start recognizing patterns earlier. You sense when something is aligned and when it is not. Not in an emotional reactionary way, but in a calm, grounded understanding. You no longer need long explanations to know when something feels right or wrong for you. You simply feel it and respond accordingly. This does not make you distant or disconnected. It makes you more stable. Emotional maturity is not the absence of feeling. It is the ability to feel without being controlled by it. It allows you to remain calm even when situations around you are uncertain. It helps you step back when necessary and engage when appropriate. And as this maturity develops, something interesting happens in your external life. Opportunities begin to feel more aligned, not because they are magically appearing, but because you are no longer forcing yourself into spaces that are not suited for you. You begin to recognize what actually fits your path, instead of chasing what drains it. At the same time, recognition begins to appear in more natural ways, not necessarily in loud validation or constant acknowledgement, but in trust. People begin to rely on your consistency. They value your presence because it feels steady. Your words carry more weight because they are no longer scattered or reactive. Your guidance becomes meaningful because it comes from experience rather than pressure. This kind of recognition is not built quickly. It is formed over time through repeated patterns of honesty, reliability, and emotional integrity. When someone consistently shows up with clarity instead of confusion, others naturally begin to trust their perspective more, not because they demand it, but because it is earned through behavior. There may also be moments where you quietly question whether life is becoming easier or whether you are simply handling it differently. In truth, it is often both. Life does not remove all effort, but it shifts the type of effort required. Instead of effort spent on survival, you begin to invest effort into growth, creation, and stability. That distinction is important because it marks a turning point. When effort stops draining you and starts building you, your entire experience of life changes. You are no longer constantly repairing emotional imbalance. You are building something more stable, more intentional, and more aligned with who you are becoming. With this shift, relationships also begin to reorganize themselves more naturally. You stop chasing clarity from people who are not offering it. You stop trying to explain your presence to those who are not willing to understand it. And you stop over-investing in dynamics that require you to abandon yourself. Instead, you begin to value mutuality, spaces where effort is balanced, where communication is honest, and where emotional responsibility is shared, rather than carried by one side. These connections feel different because they do not require constant emotional negotiation. They feel steady, not uncertain. As this continues, your internal world becomes less chaotic. There is more quiet understanding, more acceptance of timing, and more patience with life's unfolding process. You stop forcing answers and start allowing clarity to develop naturally. This does not mean passivity. It means trust in awareness rather than pressure for immediate resolution. Over time, you begin to realize something essential. Your growth was never about becoming someone else. It was about becoming more fully yourself, without distortion, without shrinking, without overextending, and without abandoning your internal truth to maintain external comfort. And in that recognition, something stabilizes within you. You no longer feel the need to prove your worth through struggle. You no longer define progress by emotional exhaustion. Instead, you begin to measure it by alignment, how much your external life reflects your internal clarity. This is the quiet turning point many people reach without fully naming it, a stage where life is not necessarily easier, but it is more honest, where relationships are not necessarily perfect, but they are clearer, where you are no longer constantly reacting to life, but consciously participating in it. And from this place, the path ahead becomes less about searching for validation and more about building consistency, less about proving strength and more about living in balance, less about holding everything together and more about choosing what deserves to stay in your life at all. What follows this stage is not a sudden transformation, but a steady unfolding. Life begins to reflect your internal stability in practical ways, through clearer decisions, healthier boundaries, and more meaningful connections. And as that unfolds, you begin to recognize something simple but profound. When you stop abandoning yourself, life stops requiring you to. And that is where real alignment begins, not in perfection, but in presence, clarity, and the quiet strength of finally standing fully in your own truth.